Good evening and welcome to another edition of Facebook Live here from Texas Christian University. My name is Heath Einstein. I have the great pleasure of serving TCU as Vice Provost for Enrollment Management, which means I oversee admissions and financial aid. And that's probably why you're here. I'm guessing you're interested in learning a little bit more about the admission process. And it's so wonderful to have so many people join us for our first event of this year. So we've got Molly from Shreveport and Trisha from Minnesota and Sadie from Frisco right here in North Texas and Catherine from Palos Verdes in my home state of California. And we've got Trinice from Austin, Texas, and Karen from Saskatoon, Canada. We have people from all over the country, all over the world, and that is fantastic. And it is an excellent representation of the student body here at TCU. So thank you so much. We start all of our programs with a land acknowledgement because we are located in a very special and sacred place. So we are respectful of all Native peoples who've been here since time immemorial. And in particular, we pay homage to the Wichita and affiliated tribes upon whose ancestral homeland TCU is located. I also want to make a special point as we start here to say, if you are joining us from the Gulf Coast region of Florida, you're in our thoughts. We hope that you are safe and staying out of harm's way. Okay, a little bit about what we do here. If this is the first time that you are joining us, we have about an hour together, now about 58 minutes, and we are going unscripted. I have no idea what is going to be said. I have no idea what is going to be asked, but we want you to ask lots of questions, everything and anything that you're interested in knowing about as it relates to the admission process at TCU especially. But if you just have questions about how admissions works, we're happy to answer those as well. So this is an unscripted hour. We're going to get to as many questions as possible. So go ahead and pop those in now. We did receive a few questions in advance through social media. So we'll try to get to those as well. Okay, you probably have noticed that I have a special guest with me this evening, and I want to introduce Amber Patterson. Hi, Amber. How are you?
Hello, I'm lovely, Heath. Thank you for having me.
Of course. Amber, why don't you tell folks a little bit about yourself? What is your role? How long have you been at TCU? All that fun stuff.
Sure. Well, my name is Amber. I am the Regional Director of Admissions in Northern California. So that regional at the beginning of my title does mean that I live and work in Northern California, and I kind of reverse commute out of my territory back to campus 4 or 5 times a year instead of leaving campus and coming out to California to visit high schools and applicants out this way. Prior to coming on board with TCU about 2 years ago, I was a public high school counselor here in Northern California as well. So it's kind of full circle for me to work all sides of college admission from my home state here in California. It's pretty great.
Yeah. Your career arc is somewhat similar to mine, as you know, in that before coming to TCU, and I've been at TCU now for 12 years, hard to believe, I spent several years working in high schools as well, helping students and parents through this application process. And so between Amber and me, hopefully you have a couple of experts who can help you. I should also note in terms of my full circle moment that I am now the parent of an applicant. I have a high school senior, and literally 10 minutes ago, before we jumped on here, we were walking through her application, and she's filling it out diligently, just like many of you are. So if you're a parent, I can very much empathize with you. And if you're a student, we've certainly have been there too. So again, go ahead and pop those questions in. We're going to get to as many as we can. I want to start by saying, before we get to questions, that of course, just to give you some basics about how the admission process at TCU works, we have a couple of different deadlines. You probably are aware of these dates, the first of which is November 1, which is coming up in about 3 weeks. And that is for both early decision round 1 and regular decision. And early action. Sorry, I should know these things. Early decision round 1 and early action. Just to give some definition to those terms, early decision is a binding application. So if you know with certainty that TCU is where you would like to be, then applying early decision is great because once you hear from us, if you are admitted, the process is over. And that can relieve a lot of anxiety for you. If you're not ready to make that commitment, you know you like TCU a lot, certainly enough to send in an application, you can use that early action plan, and then you'll hear back early, but you're not obligated to enroll if you are admitted. It still gives you an opportunity to hear from other schools. The next deadline for us, our final deadline, is February 1st, and that is early decision round 2. It holds the same binding obligation that early decision 1 does. It's just a different date, as well as that regular decision deadline. So with anybody who's admitted outside of an early decision, so if you're admitted early action or regular decision, you will have until May 1, which is the national candidate reply date, to let us know. Just to give you a little bit of sort of inside baseball, right now we're running a little ahead in applications over last year. Last year we finished with over 22,000 applications for first year admission, which was the highest mark we've seen in university history. We're currently running a little bit ahead of that. I don't say that to scare you off. Actually, I have some good news to share in that we're hoping to bring in a first-year class next fall that's a little bit bigger than the current first-year class. So we actually are going to have more space for students than last year. So I hope that's welcome news for everybody. That means getting into TCU is not impossible. I like to describe us as a selective but accessible school. So hopefully that's welcome news. Okay, let's get to some questions. I'm gonna pitch the first question to you, Amber, and it was posed to us by at Layden Falls on social. And the question is, what makes an applicant stand out? And I'm asking this to you as somebody who has really been working with students on both sides. You've helped students create that application before, but you've also now reviewed thousands of applications as someone who is part of the decision-making process. As you're looking at an application, what are the things that stand out to you?
Yeah, I mean, that's a wonderful question. And I think that question will probably vary a little bit based on what college you're applying to. But here at TCU, and when I'm reading here, I think the thing that really tends to stand out, one, I mean, strong academics and the ability to succeed in the classroom are a must on an application for us here at TCU. We do not want to admit a student that's gonna struggle academically and not be able to succeed. So, you know, we kind of have to clear that out of the way. And then after that, really an authentic student that's going to connect with our culture and enhance our, you know, campus culture and what the lifestyle's like on campus for us. You know, TCU students are super involved and engaged. TCU students are nice to each other. They're collaborative. So looking for things like that, standing out doesn't mean unique, doesn't mean not like any other applicant that I've read. Standing out means a good match to me when I'm looking at that. So being your authentic self in your application is really what tends to stand out and make an application kind of pop over one that is, let me just list the things that I think that they want to hear. Let me show you who I am is going to stand out a little bit more.
Yeah, I totally agree with that advice. And I would just add, and I love how you talked about enhancing the culture as opposed to the idea of sort of fitting into this box that some people might perceive TCU or any other college for that matter to be. We're always looking to explore ways that we can grow as an institution. That means bringing in students who don't necessarily fit sort of the stereotypical TCU mold. But to add to what the point you were making also is, I love it when students are able to demonstrate how they have how they see the world as bigger than just themselves, right?
Yeah.
Like because you know people are, I think, drawn to certain aspects of TCU, and this is what they hope to get from it. But we're also looking for, how are you going to give back to our community? One of the things that makes TCU so special is the engagement, the level of engagement that our students have. You would be hard pressed to find a university where students are as engaged as ours are. It's part of the reason why we have, by some metrics, the happiest students in the United States. And so how you can contribute to that tells us that you understand that this is really a symbiotic relationship. It's not just a one-way street. So yeah, I think that's awesome. Okay, Sarah Sarah Wilson asks, on the Common App, there's a freedom of expression question. It says it's optional. Is it truly optional? Amber, how often do we get this question, right? What does optional really mean, right?
Yeah. Here's fun fact. If TCU says optional, we mean optional in every case. Yeah, I don't know the number. I would guess maybe about a third of the applications that I read have a freedom of expression. I don't know. Do you know that number?
I think that's about right. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's what it feels like.
When we did this session last year, I think we had calculated that like 36% of students had done it. So I suspect that last year's pool was about the same. So yeah, that's right.
Yeah, I would say the freedom of expression is completely optional. If it is something that when you read that, you get excited and have some great ideas and want to do it, you should absolutely do that. But if coming up with one more idea and one more thing is just weighing you down and it's way too much and it's adding stress, you certainly don't have to.
Right. Exactly. Are there, Lucia asks, what kinds of freedom of expression submissions do people turn in? So can you give some examples of some things you've seen, some memorable ones? And I almost hesitate to ask this because sometimes we give these answers and that the takeaway is, well, I have to do X, Y, or Z. And it's not. But I think what we're trying, Amber's going to respond, but what we're trying to illustrate is there's a range and there's not one right answer, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I would say most of the submissions are digital, but people do create physical items and mail them to the office. We've had really creative people painting their ballet shoes and sending them into our office. I would say pretty common, but great. Love to get them. A lot of photo slideshows, videos. If you are going to send in a dance performance and you are one of the people in a large group, let us know which one you are, because we don't know what you look like necessarily. So sometimes I'm watching dances and I'm like, this is lovely. I have no idea which one's the applicant, but I love it. But it really, truly can be anything. And you don't have to knock our socks off with something super unique. I remember my favorite one that I got last year was a student made a little video about how to grill hamburgers. Said he was really great on the barbecue and made like a little cooking show type video about how he grilled hamburgers, which really doesn't apply to college admissions very much. However, by the end of it, with his commentary on how he learned to cook and what he made certain ways for different family members, I felt like I knew that student a little bit better. And I think that's the real point of the freedom of expression. It's just another opportunity for us to get to know you, kind of on a more personal level. And I would say that one totally succeeded. And it was super simple. And this did not take a creative, super artistic person, just someone who was open and authentic during that video. And it was great.
Awesome. Okay. Here's another one we got on social media. At Celine says, how competitive is pre-health compared to other majors? Amber, do you want to handle that one? Or I can?
Sure. I mean, some of our pre-health majors are a little more competitive than our others. I would say most of our majors fall, within a general range of each other. There isn't one that really stands out as being far more competitive than the others, with the exception of nursing. We do have a direct admit nursing program, so that admission rate is very different than the rest, our overall average for the university. But I would say those pre-health majors are on the slightly more competitive side, but not possible. We're looking for students that have, strong science curriculum and grades if they're getting into those types of fields. So, yeah.
Okay, excellent. Sadie asks, does TCU take into account demonstrated interest when going through applications? So let's talk a little bit. Amber, maybe you can describe what demonstrated interest really means, sort of in a broad way, and then I can respond to the questions.
Sure. Yeah. So a demonstrated interest is basically you letting the university that you're applying to know that you are interested in their university beyond the level of just submitting an application, because we know everybody who submits an application is obviously interested. But some ways that you can do that are, attending a college fair, or a visit when we come visit your high school perhaps, or visiting campus, or participating in some virtual events, emailing your admission counselor. Any of those things would count as demonstrating interest. And some universities overall count that in a much stronger way, or maybe have a hierarchy. We really don't. It's have you engaged with us outside of simply just submitting an application we've never otherwise heard from you.
Awesome. So for us, I've always said that, and I'm really, I like that we do it this way. Demonstrated interest is one of those things that can help you but not hurt you. Like if we see that you're really dying to come to TCU, you've attended a Monday at TCU, you've visited Amber when she came to your high school, you saw us at a college fair, you really want to be here, and you're admissible, you're a strong student, that could help push you over the top. The absence of those things, however, wouldn't necessarily hurt you, especially if you live a great distance away. We certainly wouldn't expect that somebody who lives in, Naperville, Illinois, is going to necessarily get on a plane to come visit TCU before they submit their application. So again, it's one of those things that can help but not hurt.
I would also, can I add one more thing to that?
Of course. Yeah.
For our sanity on our end, we love to communicate with our applicants, prior to their application and throughout the application process. And that is what we are here for. That is our job. However, if you are going to demonstrate your interest in our university by reaching out to us, reaching out and just introducing yourself is fine. You do not need to think up a laundry list of questions that you may or may not even care to know the answer to. When you reach out to engage with us, just reach out and introduce yourself. Maybe let us know, how interested you are in TCU, and that can be that, until you have some real questions to ask. So don't feel like there's a pressure to do it any particular way. Really just making that contact with the university count.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay, let's see. Okay, we talked about, you mentioned earlier, Amber, that at TCU optional really means optional in all senses, in all cases. So Robbie asked, will being test optional hinder my chances of getting in? So how do you respond to students about the test optional question, which is one we get all the time?
Yeah, I love our test optional policy at TCU. I am very, very proud to represent a university that I think does this in probably the most equitable way possible. No, not submitting a test score is never going to hurt you in our process. And neither is submitting any test score. We have a do no harm policy. So if you do choose to submit test scores, if they are going to be beneficial to your application, we're going to include those and use them as one of the things we're evaluating. If they come in and they're maybe kind of below the threshold where it's going to be helpful for you, your grades are saying more for you than your test scores would, we actually just ignore them. There's no way in our process that sending in a test score is going to hurt you, or not sending in anything is going to hurt you. So it's possible that your test score can help you a bit, but there's really no wrong way to go about that.
Awesome. Okay. We have hit an important point in our Facebook Live, and Amber, I don't know if you have seen this before, but we go through and do some dad jokes. Are you familiar with this?
Oh, shocking! You have a dad joke?
Yeah,
Heath
unbelievable.
Einstein has a dad joke?
Okay. Have you been warming up? Have you been tossing some warm-up pitches out in the bullpen?
I should have been.
You should have been.
I really should have been ready for this.
Okay. Well, with that as a backdrop, that little hint that I've already given you, I'm going to ask the following. Which superhero hit the most home runs? Which superhero hit the most home runs? This is perfect because we're in baseball season. We're in the postseason right now.
Okay. I'm trying to think of superheroes.
The answer.
No, sorry.
Yeah, your time's up. The answer is Batman.
Of course it is.
Batman hit the most home runs.
Why wouldn't he have? Yeah, that
Exactly.
makes a lot of sense.
Okay, good. I'm
Thank
so
you.
glad you feel
Wow,
that
they
way.
all sound so easy once you have the answer.
I know, exactly. You're right. It's easy when you're watching, not when you're in the hot seat. Okay, let's go to our next question, and that is Leslie asks: TCU allows students to submit 10 non-teacher recommendations. 10 seems a lot for admissions officers to read, but 1 to 2 is small compared to 10. Do you have a suggested number? Amber, you read a lot of applications. You see many, many, many letters of recommendation. What's an appropriate amount and what's an inappropriate amount?
Okay. So it gets the old college answer of it depends. But here's what it depends on. So we require 1 counselor letter and 1 teacher letter. Beyond that, you really can send us anything you want. However, quality is way more important than quantity. The fact that you can get 20 people to write you a letter of recommendation is not going to help you in this application process. It's really what those are saying. So if you have, let's say, 3 different teachers that have written you letters, if they all have a similar relationship with you and are all going to say a similar thing, it's really not going to benefit you any more to send in 3 of those than 1. But if you have 2 teachers, or maybe a teacher and a coach, or a teacher and employer, whatever it is, that have had very different relationships with you or might have very different perspectives to bring, then that could be useful. So I would say on average, we get the 1 required counselor letter, the 1 required teacher letter. Sometimes we see 1 to 3 more than that. But really, the other thing to consider is the more letters that are in there, the more time it takes to read that application. And the reality is we do have a lot of applications to get through. So if we get too bogged down in that, it does kind of detract from other parts of your application, or it could. So want to keep that in check, and also keep in mind what you're asking of your teachers, professors, employers, whoever it is that's going to be writing these letters for you. It's a lot of work for them too. So choosing wisely, a few is great. 10 is really probably too many.
Yeah. And to answer the first part of the question, you gave a perfect answer, Amber. To answer the first part of the question, that is just a system issue that it allows up to that point. That is in no way intended to signal to the market that we want that many. 10 is too many. I can say that with definitively. I think, we only require 1 teacher and 1 counselor, which is 2. That's the minimum needed. The majority of students submit those 2, and they're fine. So to echo what Amber's saying, if there's another person who can speak about the student in a different way from what those 2 folks are saying, then that's great. Otherwise, that's perfectly wonderful.
And I think that the reason that that's set at that level on the application, another thing that I really have enjoyed working with TCU and having counseled students through applications to multiple schools, I really, really love the effort that TCU makes to not confine students by the application itself. We really do want students to be able to tell us their whole story. And I think that's why we will allow for more of those, and we're not just really limiting that. But in that same case, oftentimes that whole story, or the extent to which a recommendation letter is going to tell that whole story, is handled in the 2 or maybe 1 more.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, Carmela asks, do you require the CSS profile to be considered for an academic scholarship? Not asking for need-based aid, only merit aid. Does a student need to apply for need-based aid, which is what the profile is used for, in order to be considered for academic aid? This is a great question.
Nope. We consider all of our applicants for our academic scholarships, and the application for that is your application to the university. So there are not extra steps to apply for our merit-based scholarship, with the exception of our Chancellor Scholarship, which does have some slightly different deadlines and requirements, but really not another application. But we certainly don't require the financial need-based applications for our academic scholarships.
Right. And those scholarships, by the way, since we're talking about that, they range up to full tuition, as Amber mentioned, for our Chancellor Scholarship. That does require students apply to the Honors College by that November 1st deadline. But then we've got these other scholarships that range from last year, at least, from 12 to 27,000. And those will, in every application cycle, those the parameters will shift a little bit. And so that top scholarship, which is always going to be the Chancellor Scholarship, but that next level down, the Dean's Scholarship may go up, the faculty may go up, et cetera, as your starting scholarship amount. And then whatever you get in scholarship, if you maintain a minimum GPA requirement required by our financial aid office, that will stick with you for all 4 years. So that's pretty great. And you can see here what are some sort of guideposts in terms of what you might expect to need in order to get an academic scholarship. Now, again, these are a couple of caveats here. The writing is really small, but when you look at that GPA, the reason why it only goes up to 4.0, and you might be saying to yourself, but I have a 4.3, we will recalculate every student's GPA and put it on a standard 4-point scale. So we'll take away the weighting that you get. Now that will actually come back into play if you have advanced classes, AP, IB, et cetera, as we are assessing your curriculum. But for factoring your GPA, we put everything on a standard scale so that we can make a comparison across the board. And then those mid-range for SAT and ACT are obviously if students submit scores and we use those scores as we're reviewing the application. If you have a score that is below a 1300 or below a 30, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're not going to get a scholarship. Likewise, if you have a 1450 or a 33, it doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get a scholarship. We're evaluating the whole academic picture. We're looking at the strength of your transcript, the school you go to, the trajectory, the whole bit. We're looking at you through that academic lens. The scholarship does not take into account your co-curricular achievements. Certainly, we review you holistically for admission to the university, but when we are offering scholarships, we're looking strictly at the academics. Okay.
Can I add one more thing on that too?
Of course, absolutely.
Sorry, just really quickly. Also, if you are wondering, you will find out from us if you are being awarded an academic scholarship with your acceptance notice. And then if you apply for need-based financial aid, you are going to need to complete that CSS profile that was asked about, also the FAFSA. And then those financial aid letters typically are going to trail the admission letters by 2 to 4 weeks. If the Department of Education gets the colleges all the information they need in a normal, timely fashion. Last year was not normal, so it was not normal for anybody. We have our fingers crossed for a more normal year this year. And then those scholarships can be stacked together as well. So if you receive an academic scholarship, you may also receive need-based financial aid, and you can add those together up to the cost of attendance to support you coming to TCU.
Amber, I'm really appreciative that you mentioned those things, the CSS profile and the FAFSA. We live this every day, so we're certainly well aware of the challenges that were created last year by the rollout of this new FAFSA, which was supposed to be simplified, but was anything but. However, if you're a parent of an applicant or you are an applicant yourself this year, then the chances are you were not aware of what happened last year, or you may be minimally aware of what happened last year. We are not confident that the Department of Education has all of their ducks in a row. And so you may find it challenging to complete the FAFSA this year. Or you may come to understand that we find it challenging in receiving information from the federal government. The good news is, as far as TCU is concerned, we do require that CSS profile. And why that's good news for you, even though it is an added layer of work a family would need to complete in order for us to consider them for financial aid, it means that we can review you without having the FAFSA and still deliver to you a financial aid package. And this is important because what we learned last year is that many families, once they got their award from us, kind of didn't believe it because they had been told over and over again by their school counselors or by what they'd read in media that colleges can't get you their aid awards until after the FAFSA is fixed. And indeed, there were many colleges that did not give aid awards until much, much later in the process than they normally do because they rely exclusively on the FAFSA. But because we have this second financial aid application, we were able to get it out. So regardless of what happens with FAFSA this year, when TCU sends out your financial aid package, it is going to be what we anticipate we are going to award you, and you can trust that those numbers are correct. We might not be able to tell you sort of in an itemized way, like where that funding is coming from, because that we would need FAFSA to know if you qualify for certain federal programs. But we can say, here is the full dollar amount, and we'll follow up with how that's broken up at a later time. So I think that's important to understand. If you have questions about that, don't hesitate to reach out individually, either to your counselor in the admission office or to our financial aid office. And we have advisors who are there to help you as well. Okay, let's see. So Alan asks, and let's stay on this topic of financial aid. Alan asks, if we apply for early application and are accepted, but do not receive adequate aid after FAFSA is filed, what are the options? So I'm going to assume, Alan, that when you say early application, you mean early decision. Because if you're applying early action, you still have till May 1 to decide, and you can compare and contrast our aid award with another college's aid award. If you apply early decision, you are committing to enroll at TCU before you know what your aid offer is going to be. And for that reason, we only encourage students to apply under that binding early decision plan if that decision on where to enroll ultimately is not going to rest on the financial aid package that you receive. And frankly, most families, the vast majority of families who apply to TCU or any other college, need to know what the cost is going to be before they can sort of sign on the dotted line, which is why a fairly small percent of our students come well below half of our students come to TCU through that binding early decision plan. Most will go through the early action. That's actually the majority of students who come to TCU. They go through the early action plan, and then a number of students also through regular decision. So I hope that's helpful. Again, feel free to contact us with individual questions. You can also go on our website, and you can do this for any college, and fill out something called the net price calculator. We are required by law to have a net price calculator on our website, and you can plug in some information about your finances. It's not a full FAFSA or CSS profile, but they'll ask some basics about your financial situation and your academic qualifications, because it will try to estimate what kind of scholarship you might get, and it will give you it's a calculator that provides an estimate of what you might expect to receive. It is not definitive. It is not an actual offer, but at least it could give you a ballpark of what we think you might be expected to pay when the dust settles. Okay. Let's see. Where should we go to next? Okay. Elizabeth asks, if a student is applying early action and taking the October 26th ACT, can we still submit that score after our application has been received by TCU? Amber, how would you respond to a student like Elizabeth who's asking that question?
Yeah, I would say yes, you can, up to a point. So I would definitely communicate that information with your admission counselor. There is something that you're going to do on the application at the very beginning, and this is kind of an important piece here. You are going to indicate, yes, I'm applying with test scores, or no, I am not. If you indicate, yes, I am applying with test scores, we need to have those test scores in order to consider your application complete. So you would want to, maybe you had an earlier test and you could put those scores in your application. That would be fine. But if you are not going to have those test scores until after the deadline, you are not going to want to check yes, or your application is just going to sit there in your portal and say that it's incomplete, and you might miss our deadline. So you would want to say no. But communicate with your admission counselor that you are taking the test and that you are expecting to be able to submit those, a little bit later in the round. What that allows for us to do is when we're reading those applications, we can kind of shove yours down to the bottom of the stack while we wait for those scores to come in. And as long as they come in within that reasonable time frame that we are still reading and we haven't given decisions yet, then we can add those. You can go back into your portal and say, change that to a yes and add those in. You can, email and be in contact with your admission counselor saying, hey, I just got these scores. Here they come. So that sort of thing. So we can, up until the point where we're releasing decisions. Once we have released decisions, we can't go back and re-review based on new grades, new test scores, or things like that come in.
Yeah. And the only thing I would add to that is, Elizabeth, luckily, it takes a lot less time now for you to get the scores than it once did. Like when I was in high school, there was like a 6 to 8 week turnaround between the time you took your exam and the time you got your scores. And now this is back in the dark ages where you had to get everything by the U.S. Postal Service. Now, and in fact, even as recently as a few years ago, it was like 2.5 weeks that you waited, and the scores came electronically, but it was a pretty set time when I started at TCU, and even up until a couple years ago. Now it's sometimes within a few days. I mean, it's really quick. So in that case, with an October 26th, you should be okay, but definitely follow Amber's advice. Be in contact with the counselor so that we can just hold. And when we say shove to the bottom, that doesn't mean you're at the back of the line and you're going to be read any differently. It just means we're going to wait so that we can give you the best shake possible.
Yeah, and you can, because of our do no harm policy as well, you can feel really confident in just sending those, like scheduling those scores to send to us automatically, so we get them at the same exact time you get them if you want to send in the official scores that way, or you can self-report once you get them. But just knowing that regardless if they turn out lower than a score you had before or lower than you had hoped for, that's never going to hurt you at TCU. So you really don't have anything to lose by doing that.
Yeah. Okay. Let's stick to this November 1 theme. Thomas asks, does when you submit your ED1 before November 1 affect your chances of getting in? In other words, you've got this deadline. Does it matter if I submit it on November 1 or October 1 or have already submitted it? Like, how does that work, Amber?
Nope, doesn't matter at all. As long as they are submitted sometime between when the application's open and whichever deadline you're applying to, and this goes for all of our deadlines, it makes zero difference. However, the counselor and me, and also the mom and me, because my children have gone through this as well, would highly recommend that you don't submit on the last day, just in case life happens and something comes up. So give yourself a little bit of wiggle room there, just in case the car breaks down on your way home from practice the night you were planning on submitting things, and sometimes getting it done a little bit earlier can just be a stress relief too, but it truly makes zero difference in your ability to gain acceptance to the university.
All right. Stacy asks, resume question. How long? What's the recommended font? Is 10 point okay? What is the margin requirement? Amber, how do you answer this question? And again, I'm smiling to myself because literally just having this conversation with my daughter about her resume. How should students be thinking about this?
Yeah, so I answer this question kind of the same way as those how many recommendation letters should I send? Again, we don't want you confined by the limitations that the application platform places on students. So if you want to submit an activities resume, in addition to completing the activities section there, if you don't feel like you have enough space in there, enough slots or enough characters to describe things, that's fine. You can definitely submit a resume to make sure that we're getting the whole picture. We don't really have a preference as far as formatting and margins and all that. We're not measuring them, but we do want it to be something that's readable, something that's not super colorful with lots of crazy things going on that are very distracting. Keep it simple. Really, we're looking for what's included, the information that's included on it, not what it ultimately looks like. Again, keeping in mind that we've got, a lot of parts and pieces to your application. So if you send us a 7-page resume, that is going to take some time away from reading all of the parts as in depth as we would probably like to. So, trying to keep things concise, but we definitely want to know everything you want to tell us. So keeping that in mind too.
Yeah,
Find that balance.
Exactly right. I always sort of chuckle when we see these like super long resumes and you're right, we want to see everything the student wants to share with us, but and they will rack their brains to put everything that they've done in their life on there. And we're really trying to focus on the things that you've been focused on in high school these last few years. Now, I always like to use this example. If you have been playing the oboe since the 2nd grade, awesome. You can put that. But if you played the oboe in the 2nd grade, then we probably don't need to see that. Yeah. Okay. It is time for another dad joke.
Oh boy, hopefully I'm doing a little better with this one.
Yeah. I mean, this is your opportunity for
redemption.
Redeem your family name. I don't want to put any pressure on you, but
okay. Sure.
I think you can do this. What do you call cheese that's not yours?
This is not
cheese that's not yours.
Nacho cheese.
It is nacho cheese. You got it right, Amber.
Cheese. Not my cheese. Nacho cheese.
Yeah, good.
Nacho cheese.
Well done.
Woo!
Okay, you have. Excellent. Okay. Let's.
Y'all, this is really what it's like working with this man too. Just so you know, this is not a show for the Facebook Live. This is Heath every day.
Oh, are we on? I didn't even realize we were on. I thought we were just talking to each other. Okay. Krista asks, what are the benefits of an AP or an honors class? I think that's a great question.
Yeah. Hopefully there's benefits.
How would you answer that as a former school counselor?
Yeah. So I think these courses can benefit you in multiple ways. So one, you have the academic benefit of taking the course itself. You are going to learn more in depth about whatever subject area it is, and you are going to be more prepared for the rigors of college coursework in that subject area. So showing us on your applications that you can hang in these advanced classes and that you do have that greater depth of knowledge is going to be beneficial in your college application as well. However, it is not a benefit to take these courses if this is going to completely burn you out. If this is to the detriment of your mental health, your grades in your other courses, your social activities, your family life. We at TCU, so many things at TCU are about balance. I talk to students about this all the time, about how we're such a great university as far as balancing the social and the academic, balancing, the number of students that participate in Greek life and don't, all these kinds of things at our university. If you look, they're about half and half, a lot of them. So keeping balance in your academics and in your life in high school is also really valuable as well. So we do not expect you to have taken AP coursework for every class that you have, but we do hope that you will take advantage of those things in the areas where you are finding success or you have really great academic interest.
Awesome.
Did I cover that?
You did it beautifully, and the proof is in the pudding for us. We actually a few years ago completely restructured how we assess a student's curriculum rigor, because we wanted to not just say that we want to bring down the anxiety, but prove it in our own practice. So if you take 12 AP classes during high school, that's fine, but you don't get any like extra credit in our process versus had you taken 6 AP classes. For us, it counts the same because there are plenty of data to suggest that once a student hits about 5 or 6 advanced classes, they have proven they can do college level work. And so why would we hurt a student who has already proven that they can do college level work? Okay, let's move on to the next question. Troy asks, can I ask about getting into the School of Engineering? How competitive is it? How will it affect my application? I know sometimes people get into schools, but not the School of Engineering. And it's a wonderful question. In fact, Amber and I were just at a conference a couple of weeks ago for college admission folks all over the country and high school counselors. And I remember one of the sessions was about how competitive engineering programs can be, and that is true at certain colleges. At TCU, interestingly, the admit rate for students who are applying to our engineering program is consistent with the rest of the university. It is not harder to get into engineering at TCU than it is to get into other academic programs. What I will say, though, is we look closely at how you have performed in your math and science courses, because that is going to be the best indicator of success in engineering. If you have only taken through Algebra 2, for example, in your math sequence, by the time you graduate high school, you are not going to be prepared to succeed in an engineering curriculum at TCU. But all else being equal, if you've got the math and science chops, then your GPA and test scores and so forth are going to be the same as students who are applying to any other program. By the way, I would totally encourage you to apply to our engineering program. It's fantastic. And because of our location in Fort Worth, you have the opportunity to intern with places like Bell Helicopters and Lockheed Martin and other big companies that are based here in North Texas. So not only are you getting a great academic experience in the classroom, you will have ample opportunity for internships that will put you in good stead when you graduate and are applying for jobs after college. We have a very high placement rate. Or if you choose to go on to graduate school, you're going to be positioning yourself very well. Okay, here is a question from Lori. She says, is TCU need blind for admission? This is a great question. And I would say yes, for the most part. And I say for the most part because when our admission officers are reviewing your application, they have no idea what a student's level of need is. There does come a point in our process when, because we only have one pot of money to give away in terms of scholarship and financial aid, where we might need to, on the margins, see, okay, how much do we have left and what is the need of the remaining applicants who we are figuring out if we can admit or not. But I don't want the takeaway to be, well, I'm at a serious disadvantage if I'm a high need family, because if you look at the numbers over the last several years, we have for 4 years in a row increased the number of students who are in our incoming class who receive the Pell Grant, which is a proxy for high need. So we are very much interested in and have successfully created a diverse socioeconomic student body. That will continue. We are committed to doing that. So I'd say yes, mostly. Hope that answers your question.
And then there's also very different financial requirements if you are an international applicant that don't necessarily have anything to do with us and our admission processes, but have to do with visa processes and everything else. So it works a little bit differently for international students.
Great point, Amber. And I know there were, I think someone did ask a question about that somewhere in the chat. I haven't, I can't recall who it was, but there was a question about sort of different requirements for international students. And that is the big one, is that because we do not meet need for any international student, we could cover the most we would cover is up to tuition, and even that's a lot. Most students wouldn't even get that. There is a minimum amount that an international student would need to demonstrate having in financial support, whether that is the family themselves or other sponsors of the student, before we will even review the application. So that's an important distinction. Thank you very much. Mm-hmm. Okay. Maddie asks, if you apply and don't get in on January 1st, meaning apply by one of those early deadlines, are you able to apply again? If so, when will you find out? So Amber, what happens to students who are not admitted in the early rounds?
So you can only apply to TCU one time as a first-year applicant. So if you do not gain admission or are not deferred within that first round, and it is a deny answer, you are not able to reapply in that second round. However, We have a phenomenal transfer program. So you can then attend college anywhere else, community college or other university, and you can reapply to TCU as a transfer student as early as the following spring, right? One semester of college coursework after graduation. So that is, oh, look, here's our transfer requirements. So that is a great second chance, not only at admissions, but also at academic scholarships. So even if you were admitted to TCU as a first year student, if you were not able to earn the academic scholarships that you needed in order to attend, you can certainly come to us via the transfer pathway. At that point, for scholarships, we're just looking at your college GPA. So if you go knock it out of the park at a college for the first semester or year or however long you want to be there, and then come to us, you may qualify for quite a bit more financial academic scholarships as well. So great option at TCU.
Well, and thank you for plugging transfer. We love our transfer students at TCU. We are probably more transfer friendly than most schools that we tend to compete against. We have a transfer population that is, we bring in about 400 new transfer students each fall, another 150 or so in the spring. So a pretty hefty percentage of our student body is made up of transfer students. And we are opening up 2 new residence halls in this coming January in the spring semester. So if you are a transfer applicant for the spring, we will have housing for you as well. So that's super, super exciting. Okay, Adeline asks, if you applied for early action, but are still waiting for letters of recommendation or a transcript after November 1st, will you still be considered for EA, or do all pieces need to be in by November 1st? Amber, what say you?
The deadline is November 1st, but we are not horrible, horrible people. So if there is a reason why those are not in yet, and you are in communication with us, we will allow a little grace as much as we can, kind of similar to those test scores that might come in while we're reading applications. So as long as we're working with you and we're able to get them in pretty shortly after that, it's typically not the end of the world, but there will become a point where we have moved forward enough in the application process that your application is just incomplete. And at that point, we're not just going to kick you to the curb and say, sorry, you can never apply. More likely, we're going to want to work with you to let's just shift your deadline to the early decision 2 or regular decision round that's on February 1st to allow you that extra time to get those in.
Yeah, we're especially sensitive to situations in which the lack of an application component being present is beyond your control. You know, if it's an essay that you forgot to complete, that's one thing. That's on you. If it's somebody else isn't doing their part, we don't want to hold that against you. So as Amber said, we try to be really gracious about this. There will come a point where we do need all the materials before we can make a decision. But we will give usually several days grace period. Okay, and following up on that, because you mentioned reaching out to the counselor, Michelle asks, you mentioned reaching out to your admissions counselor. How does an applicant do that? Are there counselors assigned alphabetically by last name? How do we assign counselors, and then how would one go about finding out who their counselor is?
Yeah, so we are all assigned by geographic territories. So me being a regional counselor in Northern California, my geographic territory is Northern California. And we do that so that we can build relationships with the high school counselors in these areas, really get to know what the high schools are about so that we can do a better job of admitting students from our territories. We understand the context of where you're coming from a little bit better. We're more familiar with that. If you would like to reach out to your counselor, you can head over to our website, or your friend Google has the answer to most things. If you Google, who's my TCU admission counselor, it will take you right to our admissions page. It does have a meet your counselor page. You can type in the name of your high school. You can just see a list of all of us and go through that way, whatever suits you. And then from there, you'll find our email address, our phone number. Any way that you would like to reach out to us is great. And if you're really struggling to find that, you can always email frogmail@tcu.edu with your question, and that will get forwarded over to your admission counselor as well. Or you can ask who is my admission counselor, and we will get you in touch with that correct individual.
Yeah, and our team is really friendly. If you think we're friendly, just wait till you meet everybody else. We really want to talk to you. So, as Amber said, you can reach out if you want to set up a one-on-one appointment or like a Zoom, or if whatever is going to be best for you will work for us. You can also see, by the way, on our website when we might be visiting your high school or your community college, because we do that all throughout the fall. We're about halfway through, maybe a little more than halfway through our heaviest recruitment period. But like just between, I was looking at this the other day. I was looking at the schedule of where our team is on the road right now. And between last week and this week alone, we hit 17 different states and 3 different foreign countries. Yeah, Guatemala, Panama, and India. So we are all over the place. By the time this season is over, we will be in more than 40 countries. Maybe 40 countries. We'll be in more than 40 states. Probably not 40 countries, but close to it. We try to get to as much of the globe as possible because we want to meet you in person if that is of interest to you. Okay. We had a question come through. Is there an application fee waiver? We can do that for you if that is going to be what, if our application fee is what is holding you up from applying, please let us know. We can waive the application fee. That is not a problem. By the way, all first-generation students automatically have their application fee waived. That's not something you need to ask for. All veterans also, as a thank you for your service, will have your application fee waived as well. Okay. Isaac asks, does it matter if I'm in Spanish Honors Society? Amber, is that important for a student to be in a particular club?
Isaac, is that important to you? That's the answer. So it is not important to us that you are a member of any specific club. It is important to us that you are doing what you want to be doing, and then that you're sharing that with us so we know what you're doing. So we want to see what things you are authentically interested in. So if being in the Spanish Honor Society is something that's important to you, please list that in your activities. Please tell us why that's important to you, and that will be important to us as well. But you know what? If you tried out the Spanish Honor Society and it was not for you and you moved on to do something different, that is A-okay as well.
Awesome. Okay, Amber, Zoe asks, do you have any advice on how to approach TCU's short answer questions?
Yes, authentically. So our two questions really have to do with, when I talked about you coming in and enhancing our culture on campus, we have some things that we really value, and we hope that we're kind of a values match with the students coming in, because those things are at our core and at our heart. So we're going to kind of list out some of those things for you in those questions. We're going to talk about including others, right? Creating an inclusive environment and our values. Really, as you read through those lists, if there is one that stands out to you and you're like, oh yeah, I value that too, that's the one you should write on. We are definitely not looking for students to do a whole bunch of research on TCU, and send us with a list of clubs that you can't wait to join and things like that. We just want to know from your gut what matters to you, right? We're trying to see what kind of a values match you are with our institution and in what ways you're going to be able to enhance our community, and be a part of our community and help us grow, while still maintaining our real core values, and being connected and collaborative and kind people. So that's really what we're looking for. So just go with your gut. It doesn't have to be super long. It doesn't have to be super researched. I hope it's not super researched. I hope it's just really kind of an immediate answer that you might give if someone were to ask you in an interview. That's kind of the answer that we're looking for on paper.
Okay, Amber, we have reached the 7 o'clock hour Central Time. I know it's 5 o'clock where you are, but thank you so much. I want to just a couple of closing notes. First of all, thank you to all of you for asking incredible questions. We didn't get to nearly all of them. There are many more. If you asked a question that we couldn't answer, do not hesitate to reach out to us. Again, that email address is frogmail@tcu.edu. And as Amber pointed out, you can also reach out directly to your counselor. We are happy to address anything. The other thing I want to mention is that we have another Facebook Live coming up on November 7th. It's going to be led by our Dean of Admission, Mandy Castro, and the topic is going to be scholarship and financial aid. So I know we touched on that a little bit tonight, but we're going to go into much more depth. So don't hesitate to join us then. In fact, we want you to circle your calendar. And also, I want to make a special shout out to Julie Tipton Cochran, who is joining us, and she appreciates our application tips as she first applied to TCU in 1956. So we are always happy to have all Horned Frogs of all ages with us. That is really, really cool. So thanks, Julie, for being a frog. All right, that's it for now. We thank you for being with us, and until next time, go Frogs.
Go Frogs.